Hello, my friends, and welcome to a brand new episode of Discourse in Magic with Danny Orleans. Danny is an incredible magician who has done so much. He's performed for kids and schools and toured, but the thing that people know him for the most is performing at trade shows. And in this episode, he walks us through everything you need to know about being a trade show magician, what the magic is like, how to get those kind of gigs, how much to charge for a trade show, what the environment is like, and how you can start your trade show magic business and start booking some trade shows. And he even tells us why there's so much opportunity in the trade show magic business and something that you can actually latch onto and get some gigs. This was an amazing episode, not only learning about kids magic and performing and Danny's story, but most importantly, learning about what it's like to be a trade show magician. They are few and far between compared to all of the other industries of magicians, and Danny holds nothing back. I hope you liked the episode as much as I did. Here it is, a wonderful episode with Danny Orleans. Hello, my friends, and welcome to a brand new episode of Discourse in Magic with the one and only Danny Orleans. Danny, how are you doing?
I am doing great here in Chicago, Jonah. Thanks for having me.
I am so excited to chat. I just spent a couple days in Chicago with the incredible Tim Hannig, and we talked about you quite a bit. And I figured time to only bad things. Don't worry. No, I'm kidding. Only the best. Let's start the beginning. I know we're going to end up talking about trade shows and how to do that, but let's talk about how did you even get started in magic in the first place?
Well, my story is like a lot of magicians, boyhood magic set. When I was 6 years old, my father did all the tricks with me from the Mr. Tricko magic set in the 1960s. Did my first my mother said, you should do a magic show for your brother's birthday party. So when I was 11, my friend who lived up the street from me and also did magic, we put together a little two-person show, and
Cool.
we did it when we were 11 or 12 years old. We did a lot. It was very successful. We did a lot of, we made Xerox copies of a hand-drawn brochure and papered the neighborhood. We stuck them in people's, and that was our marketing in 1967. And it worked.
Crazy.
And we, because people knew our names. My father was a local pediatrician. His father was a local gynecologist. So people kind of knew us. So we had this immediate trust just with our last names. And we started doing 1 or 2 birthday parties a month. And our parents would drive us around. And when he was in 8th grade, like 2 years later, he said, I decided I'm going to be an anesthesiologist when I grow up. I don't have time to do magic shows anymore. So he quit. And I went on and continued to do them, kids' birthday parties on my own, all through high school, all through college. I came out to Chicago to go to college. And then I got my degree in education. And I went to an Abbott's get-together in the mid-'70s, late '70s. And I saw David Ginn. And David Ginn did a kid show. And David Ginn did a lecture. And David Ginn had Professional Magic for Children as a book. And I looked at his show and I went, wow, this is like a thing. You could be a professional kids magician doing schools. I didn't realize that. Schools and camps and libraries. And so I talked to some people who were knew a lot about marketing, knew a lot about magicians that were, at the convention. And they said I should go for it. So I quit teaching and decided to do magic full time.
Wow. So talk to me about that. I think the jump into doing magic full time is always scary. I like to say it's crazy no matter what's going on. It is crazy. What were your resources? I guess at that point you weren't still papering the neighborhood. What were you doing at that point, and how did you confidently quit a teaching job to pursue magic? How did you get started in really gigging?
Okay. So unlike what people have today as a challenge, where they have a job with health insurance and it's a good salary, they got to leave I talk to people all the time. I want to quit my $100,000 a year job and do magic, right? I didn't have that scenario. I was 24. I had taught for 2 years. My my salary, you have to remember this is $1978, was $12,000 a year. I know it's hard to imagine, but houses were 75,000,
Yeah.
right? But as an equivalent, college cost me $5,000 a year, and I was at an elite college. I went to Northwestern University, which was an expensive college. So that, and I knew, I did the math with the number of birthday parties I did. My senior year of college, I earned $5,000 doing kids' birthday parties in a year. That was enough to pay for Northwestern, right? As a comparison in terms of what a dollar was worth back then. So I made more money. I knew if I could make $5,000 a year doing magic, and only working weekends and really no marketing except for a little ad in the newspaper and word of mouth, that I could double that.
And was there something that you started doing like out the get-go when you quit the job differently, or you just kept doing more of what you were already doing?
Well, David Ginn said do school shows, and I worked with a man named Tom Zoss, who used to write. The name will not be familiar to most magicians here, but he used to write in the Abbotts had a publication. I can't remember the name of it. It was like a newsletter they put out monthly. And he used to write a column there. Tom Zoss was his name, Z-O-S-S. He was a lawyer. He was a part-time magician, also very involved in public relations and advertising for local businesses in South Bend, Indiana. And he helped me so much, and I paid him. I hired him, but he helped me so much. And he said, go through the phone book and get the names of all the schools and create a brochure and write to all the schools and tell me you have this kids' magic show and that you're a former teacher. And that worked beautifully.
Wow.
And I sat and I, wrote addresses, hand wrote addresses on envelopes and had a brochure printed and did a mailing. And, I leveraged the fact that I had a degree in education from Northwestern University, which is like a really big deal here in the Chicago area.
Yeah.
Really helped. And,
I'm going to ask a question you may not know the answer to, but how well did those mailers convert? Like 1 in 4, 1 in 10, 1 in 100? Like, what did it look like in terms of the results you got from sending mailers to schools?
I had 10%. I remember like a 10 to 15% response rate, and most of those booked.
Wow. So maybe 1 in 10 or so bookings from the mailers.
Right. So I probably got, we probably sent out like 500 schools in the greater Chicago area.
Wow.
Big, right? 50 bookings. That was fabulous.
Crazy.
Yeah. Back then it was, marketing was very different, and there was no internet. You didn't have to make a video for anybody. That was impossible. You sent a couple of pictures and some testimonials. Nobody checked the testimonials. They had no way to. It was great. But what happened there is I learned about school showcases where you perform in front of a bunch of PTA parents and they make a decision to hire you. And I began to get into those very quickly. And I was great at that because I understood the mindset of what at the time was the PTA lady, because I had been a teacher. I had dealt with these parents. And I just had this advantage over other performers who were like ballet companies and quartets and different other kinds of programs that were in schools. They didn't really know how to sell themselves. They were just artists. But I was able to really leverage my charisma.
So I know you did schools and kids' birthday parties for a while, and then you did a bit of a transition into trade shows and some other events. Let's talk a little bit more about the schools. Like, give us an idea of what and how long that career of kids' parties in schools, like that portion lasted. Was it the same marketing throughout, showcases, mailers, and then word of mouth for the kids' birthday parties, and you sort of rode that for 20 years? Am I understanding correctly, or is it something I'm missing?
That's pretty much correct, except it built up. So first it was local Chicago. right? In the late 1970s through the early 80s. And then I found out about these showcases that were outside of Chicago, in Long Island, in upstate New York, in Louisville, Kentucky. And I would do these showcases, and then I'd get like 2 solid weeks of bookings, which would be two school shows in the morning at one school, 2 school shows in the afternoon at another school, and go back to the hotel and collapse.
Wow.
And so I did every school in the greater Detroit area, every school in the Upper Peninsula, every school in New Orleans, every school in Louisville, Kentucky.
Yeah.
I'd get tours. They were tours, but it was just me with with 2 suitcases, 1 trip from the car into the school, 20-minute setup, 45-minute show, reset, do a different show for the older kids.
And in terms of, obviously the marketing for schools and kids' birthday parties and all of that has changed, but what makes for a good show for kids hasn't? What do you think the advice for somebody who is into the kids market right now, schools, camps, birthday parties, what sort of advice do you have for them about how to have an amazing school show that gets you a bit of a reputation?
Right. Well, things have, greatly changed in the education market. When I was performing, it wasn't necessary to have a theme. The first big theme that hit schools were say no to drugs. Ronald Reagan's wife, Nancy, came out whenever he was president, I guess it was the 80s, came out with this say no to drugs, teach kids to say no to drugs. And so magicians kind of latched onto this, and schools began to look for content. My show was more curriculum based. I had a show called The 5 Senses and Beyond, and I did one magic. And it was just to teach kids and make them aware that there are 5 senses. What are they, and what do they do, and which organ in the head has to do with that sense? So it was really basic. But every school, every kindergarten, first grade, second grade had a week where they taught that.
Right.
So having that, being able to say I matched the school curriculum was a huge entree for me. It really paved the way and made it very easy for a school to justify hiring a magician, which back then especially was still like, is he going to wear glitter?
Yeah.
Going to be Vegas-y? Is he going to bring a woman who's going to wear fishnets? The people were afraid of those kinds of things. So it was important for me to market myself very far away from the icon of the Las Vegas or nightclub magician.
And now, is that still the case in terms of you really want to match school curriculum or even like school objectives?
Even more so now. Now, people like, there's a bunch of magicians now that really focus on anti-bullying, character building, getting along with other people, all of these more character-oriented trade shows that are helping kids with, social skills and, being able to understand other people and be tolerant of other people. That's just these kinds of things these subjects are very important in elementary schools now. I don't do school shows anymore.
Yeah.
I have one that I do every year, but it isn't really a school show. It's for school children, but it's for really brilliant kids who are competing in a mathematics contest. Cool. And while it's being scored, they all go into a college auditorium, and I do a show for them. It's really more entertainment oriented.
Cool. And what about the actual, never mind the angle to get booked in the school. What about the actual performing for kids? It is so different than performing for adults. What advice do you have for magicians who are trying to get better at just performing for kids?
Well, I think the most important thing that a magician has to master is controlling audience behavior. You are usually not in a theater You are in a gymnasium when you
Yeah.
perform. It is not acoustically, or
Yeah.
built, right? That's number one, right? Sometimes there's a lot of background noise, such as air conditioning systems, Coke machines, that kind of thing coming
Yeah.
in. They're sitting on the floor. Sometimes they don't even have a stage for you. They certainly don't have a backdrop. So a lot of, the sound, if they provide sound, there's often more than likely problems with it. It's mediocre.
Of
Yes. So
course.
the performing magician now has to overcome all of those things. And luck, it didn't exist when I was performing in school. These backdrops that you can set up in 30 seconds that are now available for magicians, fabulous portable wireless sound systems that were not available when I was performing. But all of those are great tools. However, still, the magician has to understand basic child psychology. And when I released a DVD set 10 years ago called The Art of Presenting Magic for Children, which is still, shameless plug, available as a download now on Vanishing Ink, Magic, I discuss this a lot. Many, many magicians have come to me and said, your techniques for controlling children are genius. And
Can you give us one of those nuggets right now?
Yes, I will. Kid's birthday party, right? A kid's, you're performing for 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds. One kid is so excited, he stands up and starts jumping up and down. And now other kids start to imitate him. And now you're starting to lose control of your audience. This is in a living room, let's say, 25 kids. You want them seated. You don't want them standing.
Yeah.
So the technique that I learned from a kindergarten teacher is called positive reinforcement. You ignore the child who is behaving incorrectly, and you compliment the child who is behaving correctly. So I ignore the child who's jumping up and down, and I look at the kid next to him who's sitting with his legs crossed, and I say, Johnny, I really like the way you're sitting with your legs crossed in front of you, ready for the next magic trick. And the kid who's bouncing up and down hears that, feels ignored. I've complimented the other kid, and the kid will sit down. 99 out of 100, that kid jumping up and down will sit down and imitate Johnny sitting next to him.
Love it.
And that's called behavior modification, which does not involve, cattle prods and electric shocks, right? It's just complimenting children that are behaving correctly to get other students to behave the same way. And this works in a group of 20 and it works in a group of 200. It's an amazing skill set to acquire, and it's super easy to do. I just told you everything. You just look at the person who's behaving correctly and you compliment them out loud so everybody can hear. And you do it in a sincere way.
I love that. And I think that, like you said, the biggest skills for a children's performer is managing the crowd. Because as we know, if you're in a school or if you're in a camp, like there's people that are supposed to be helping you out. There's teachers and stuff that are supposed to be helping you out. But for the most part, it's just you and 250 kids,
And remember, as a magician, you don't want to come off like the gym teacher who grabs the kid by the shoulder or the arm, says, sit down, Johnny. You can't do that. You're the nice performer. So you have to solve the problem with a smile on your face without, being, angry at a child. And it's a great workaround.
Let's talk about the transition, in your life from doing kids shows to doing not only corporate, but trade shows and being a predominantly trade show magician. When and why did that start to happen?
So when I turned 30 in around 1982, 83, 84, I was like in my late 20s. I met my wife, Jan Rose. I held auditions for
a wife? Oh, no, never mind.
It ended up being that way. I had done all these school shows all over. a theater, a downtown Chicago theater came to me and said, we need a program for the holidays, performing every day between Thanksgiving and New Year's. And it's going to be for kids. We're going to bus in school children, and they're going to be young, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. You go, man. And they just said, you're perfect for this. You have the perfect show for this. But we want it to be bigger. We're going to have 600 kids, and it's a beautiful stage with lighting, sound. And so I had the show rewritten so it was bigger, and there was a role for an assistant who talked, and it was a little play about the importance of friendship and the value of presence and the value of friendship. And there was all these magic tricks and comedy that happened. And I held auditions for a female assistant and who could play the role of a young sprite of an undetermined age. And, was looking for women who were 5 feet tall and thin and good dancing ability. And my wife, Jan Rose, auditioned. Lucky me.
Wow.
So that's what happened. So I hired her, and then we toured that show, which was a much bigger version of my school show, at theaters and children's museums around the country, often performing in theaters from 500 to 2,000 seats.
Wow. And so, that was mostly, again, how did you book those? How did you book theaters and museums?
Agents.
Yeah.
That was all done through agents that handled children's touring companies.
Cool.
So we even performed up in Toronto at University of Waterloo.
Yeah, that's in Waterloo, not Toronto, but close enough. If I was alive, I would have come and seen it. So how did that start making the transition into trade shows?
I've always believed that it's important as a magician to figure out what you're good at and then learn how to be great at it. And so what happened is in the mid-80s, late 80s, I started really working hard on my close-up magic. And lucky for me, Eugene Berger lived 2 blocks away.
Wow.
So he and I were having lunch every week, and I was learning close-up magic. And luckier for me, Eugene was not big on complex sleight of hand.
Yeah.
Remember, I'm in Chicago. Who was there? Marlowe.
Yeah, of course.
And his whole group, Simon Harrison and David Solomon and Bill Malone and the extended group, John Bannon, right?
Yeah.
And those guys were all about, moves and techniques and sleights. But Eugene followed more of a Matt Schulian approach. Learn how to palm a card, learn how to force a card, learn how to control a card. And there's only any.
Yeah.
And Eugene had these fabulous routines, that had great audience appeal. And so it was easy for me to master his approach as opposed to, a heavy, a Marlowe.
Yeah, of course.
And so I followed that school. And, Eugene, and Eugene also worked on the mind reading act with Jan and I did. I mean, we spent lots of time with Eugene for, up until he died, and he was instrumental in me really becoming a close-up magician. I got a gig at a restaurant, and then I started to hear about these trade shows, and I went to the auto show, and I saw a magician named Mark Sweet perform.
You attended the auto show?
I attended the auto show
Yeah.
when I was in my early 30s, and I saw Mark Sweet perform. And I said, oh, I can do that. I can integrate a message into a magic trick. I see what he's doing there. And then I saw Paul Gertner perform. And then I saw Eddie Tulloch perform, who was the very first trade show magician, but still working in his 70s.
Wow.
And I got very interested in that. And by being, I think the best training for a trade show magic is being a restaurant magician, because you work out your 5 or 6 tricks. They're in the same order, or pretty much in the same order. And the transitions between tricks really get smoothed out when you're working in a restaurant. And so I got a call in the early 90s. I got a call to do a trade show. And I
Just
said,
by happenstance.
Yep, it was a referral from another magician.
Cool.
Was in Milwaukee, was unavailable. He said, oh, Danny Orleans is down in Chicago, because they wanted to hire a local. And I got the gig. And I got very lucky. It was a large company, a printer from Canada, actually. And the woman said, this is great, so much better than I thought it would be. You were so much better than the guy we had last year. And apparently they had a magician the year before whose name I never did find out. But she said, we have 9 trade shows in the next year.
Wow.
Here are the dates. It was like, boom, I was set. Very.
I have a couple questions on this. I want to talk more about like how to get them and how to keep getting them. Then I want to talk more about like the magic at a trade show. Obviously, that's like a really good luck of you working on Close Up at around the same time frame that you got a trade show and you knocking it out of the park, and it being a company that has 9 trade shows. Other than that, how does one get trade show bookings? Where does that come from? Because it's super different from getting company parties and from getting birthday parties. It's a whole different can of worms. And I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but like most booths at trade shows don't have a magician, and most booths do not think about having a magician. So it's possible that a lot of the marketing is convincing them to try it out and convincing them to have a magician instead of the other way around, where someone's looking for a magician and you're like, hi, I can do that. So what does the marketing look like in the trade show industry now?
Okay. So you asked a lot of questions and you brought up a lot of points there. So let me address a few things. And feel free to ask the questions again if I don't cover what you want. Marketing in trade shows is extremely difficult because, as you stated, most trade show booths don't have live entertainment in the booth. This is a big myth in the magic community, by the way. Most magicians who know that trade shows are a thing assume that if they were to go to a trade show, every booth would have some kind of magician or some kind of activity in the booth that would be fun and engaging. And in fact, 95% of booths don't have anything except a backdrop with pictures of their products, text, the name of the company, some handouts, and a couple of people in there. Maybe if they have a product that they're selling, a can of turtle wax at an auto show or something, they would have that. But most products can't really be demonstrated at a trade show.
Yeah.
If you have a machine,
tax software or something like
software can be demonstrated, but most products, if people make a bulldozer, do they bring the bulldozer to the show? Well, sometimes they do, but what, can it really be pushing around dirt? No, they make it go up and down, if they want. So one of the big myths is that there's something in every booth. And in fact, there's not. The other myth is that the magic community thinks that the people who run these individual booths at the trade shows know that magic is a thing that they can do. It's a choice. In fact, 95% of the people that see me at a trade show say, I've never seen magic at a trade show. Well, what a clever idea. I would have never thought of this. 95% of people tell me that, whether they work at a trade show or just walking the trade show. But, let's just take a step back to make sure that your listeners really understand what trade shows are. Some may not. So the definition is that it's a gathering of business professionals that have an exhibit and also visitors who work for a business, and they all come together in some kind of specialized venue. Sometimes that's a very large hotel banquet room, but more often it's a large convention center, like McCormick Place in Chicago, the Las Vegas Convention Center, Javits Center in New York, the Convention Center in Orlando. Every major city, and most minor cities too. Minor cities like Indianapolis, Kansas City, Tampa, they have convention centers as well. And so one way to think about it for the magic community is think about the dealer room at Magic Live or the dealer room at Magic Convention. The dealers have little booths, and you walk from booth to booth to booth, and you get to see a demonstration of the tricks. And the tricks are all on a table. You get to see with them, pick them up, hold them, and there's a person or two in the booth ready to take your money, and some are better at selling it. So that's kind of what a trade show is, except they tend to be in certain industries. Just like there's the music industry, there's the financial industry, the legal industry, the automotive industry, the hospitality industry, aviation, logistics, robotics, toys, foods, home builders, construction, utilities, wind power.
Everything. Yeah.
Everything. And there's even things you would never think of. Next month, I'm going to Vegas, and I'm going to be at a show called Super Zoo, which is attended by pet store owners. Anything a pet store owner would need to run their store is at that conference. Not just like the pet food that they would sell, but the lighting they need, the point of sale system they need, the carpeting they need, the windows, everything. So it's enormous. The other myth that magicians don't understand about trade shows is trade shows is the most underserved market by magicians. So let me expand upon that briefly. So if I say, name 5 markets that magicians can work in, 5 vertical markets, you might say there's the college market, there's the fair market, there's the festival market, there's the school market, kids' birthday,
corporate, kids' birthday,
corporate, casino, cruises, right?
Yep.
Okay. So let's think about how many casinos there are in the country. I don't know the answer to that, but
500, 1,000.
Right. Okay. In 1 week, there's 250 trade shows in the United States.
No way.
Every trade show has an average of 100 booths.
Wow.
That's 55,000 opportunities per week for a trade show magician to be working. It's crazy.
Wow.
And that's something that now the problem, of course, is what you said earlier. How do we get in touch with those decision makers of what they're doing in a trade show booth?
And convince them to have a person there who's not even in the know about their product.
And you know the expression catch-22, right?
Yep.
Okay. The catch-22 basically says that you can't get hired until you've performed. Nobody's going to hire a trade show magician unless they can prove that they've already worked a trade show through a video or pictures or even testimonial. And although I agree that makes sense, in fact, it is not true. How do I know that? Because every trade show magician
started somewhere
without any experience. And if you were to talk to today's major trade show magicians, the guys who are doing more than 20 shows a year, you would find out that it was kind of an accident.
Yep.
Where they did a cross-selling. They had a relationship with a client. Maybe they did a cocktail party for them. Maybe it was at their home. Maybe it was their brother-in-law's cousin. But there was some way that they got in. And
then they got photos and testimonials and videos to do the second.
That's how you do it. The other way is, right now, in this day and age, I do not recommend buying a list of some sort and email blasting them. It just doesn't work anymore. People don't open their emails. They don't respond to people they don't know. And if you don't have any proof of concept that you've been doing it, that's going to work against you too. The best way is to leverage your ongoing relationships with your friends, your neighbors, and existing clients and see if they exhibit at a trade show. If you get booked at a corporate event to do strolling magic, go onto their website, find out if they do trade shows. Go onto their Facebook page, scroll back a year, see if there's any pictures of them in a trade show booth.
As of right now, do most of your trade show clients come from that, or it comes from someone seeing you at a trade show for something else and wanting it too? Where do they come from for you?
This is not what I'm going to say is not only true for me, but it's also true for trade show magicians like Paul Gertner, Seth Kramer, Scott Tokar, David Harris, Robert Strong. I can go on and on with the list here.
Yep.
Anders Boulanger in Canada. I would guess that this is true for me, and I'm sure it's true for them. 90% of the trade shows I do are for an existing client. Repeat business over and over again for years. Paul Gertner worked for Pitney Bowes for like 30 or 40 years. And I have clients that have, lasted more than 10. Clients I've worked with in the 90s that now get a new job and come back to me 10, 20 years later. Not uncommon at all. It's really hard to get a new client. And when I get a new client, it's 90% of the time they've seen me at a trade show and they go, my God, this is the best thing since sliced bread. We're doing a show coming up. Are you available? And then, we have to get through the big hump of that. I'm a lot more expensive than they think I'm going to be.
Yeah.
It's a big hump to get through. And most, the enthusiasm goes away a week later with the proposal, and they're actually seeing a number and they already have a set budget, and it's not just kicking another $1,000 at it, at their budget.
If you're comfortable, I'd love to talk about that. Obviously, it's going to be all over the map for different magicians, but like, I'm pretty aware of what corporate magic goes for. I'm pretty aware about what school magic goes for and birthday parties go for. What does a trade show magician make in a day or in a 4-day window? Even just a range so that I have an idea.
Sure. Here's the range that I know of when I talk to people. And I'm pretty sure that most trade show magicians are being honest with me. And the reason I know that is sometimes I book them.
Right.
And sometimes they book me. We share clients. If I can't do a gig, I'll recommend somebody, and I'll book them and I'll mark them up. Right. So I know what they're willing to go out for. Right. Yep. So therefore, I kind of know what they're getting. Yep. So I highly recommend that a trade show magician not sell himself on a day rate. You mentioned, what do they get for a day? Because the booth isn't there for a day. The carpeting isn't there for a day. The graphics aren't there for a day. Right. They're there for the whole time. 3-day show, 2.5-day show, 4-day show, whatever it is. So I look at the project. So I also do it where I'm including expenses now.
Yep.
And that way, I say to the client, here's one number. This includes all my expenses.
Yeah, you then don't have to be like, oh, and you have to fly me there. Oh, and you have to pay for my hotel. Oh, you have to, none of that.
All I tell them is you have to pay for my registration to the conference because it costs them anywhere from $500 to $1,500 just to get me a badge at many of these shows. Right. So, that's an add-on.
Yeah.
Some booths have to pay for, some don't. Just depends on the trade show and how many other people they have going to the show. But let me get to the answer of the question, right? The question, the answer to the question, and most people don't include expenses. So most people are going out for anywhere from $1,300 to $3,000 a day. And I know that's an enormous range, but that's
pretty tight range, actually. 1,300 to 3,000 is a pretty easy to comprehend range.
Okay, good. I'm glad you found it easy. That's kind of what it is. So it's a very good living if you can do 30 a year. And these are 2-day events, 3-day events.
Yeah.
It's a very good living. You're easily making 6 figures.
And the best part.
That's a plus expenses range. Right. So that's what the magician would net.
The best part about that is that if you do a good job, it is unlike being a corporate magician, which is that corporate magician can't have you for their holiday party every year. But the trade show can have you every trade show every year.
Why? And what's important to understand is why. Why is that true? I want your listeners to understand why that's true.
Well, a couple reasons. The first is that more than any other industry for magic, the ROI is ridiculously obvious because they see the crowd of people there and they get the list of names or the volume of products sold or whatever, with it being there. And the second is there's usually different people walking the floor every year.
Exactly. That's exactly correct. Your second answer is the correct answer. The reason they can have you again and again is because the audience is different every time. Where the audience for the company party is the same, 90% the same every time, right? So that's why it's really hard to get rebooked at the company party every year, unless the party's huge, But at a trade show, it's easy. And what's really good is sometimes it's just once a year. Some companies just exhibit at one big show a year, but most companies exhibit at many shows per year, 4, 5, 8. I mean, if you can get in, like Scott Tokar now is working for Dell Computer. How many trade shows do they do a year? Anybody that uses a computer, right? Any vertical market is going to use a computer. Right? So, and he is doing gangbusters with them. He's done so well. I don't have as much work now, but I used to have a lot of work with ExxonMobil. Same thing. Tons of shows. If you can get in with a Fortune 500 company and start working with the different divisions and cross-sell throughout the divisions,
wow,
you can do very well. I mean, Rick Gerber was the Anheuser-Busch magician for years and years and years, and did more than just trade shows for them, but lots of events. And so this is what is so great about this market.
Yeah. What makes a great trade show magician? How is it different than a restaurant or a company party? What makes someone so good and so worthy of bringing back?
I think it is the vibe that the person puts off and how well they fit into the business environment. And I think we have to start with a person's physical appearance, because remember, who's hiring you? Right? The trade show manager is hiring you, or the vice president of marketing is hiring you. They're thinking, we're going to be in a trade show booth here. This isn't just entertainment. This is our corporate image.
Right.
Our corporate image, our logo, our, how we speak about the company, how we physically appear to the passerby in the booth. So, there are people that'll disagree with me, but if you look at the successful corporate magicians, the successful trade show magicians, you get people that look like they could be the marketing vice president of the company. And so.
Yeah, they look the part.
They look the part. And in order to get hired, if you have an extreme, visage, or your hair is extreme, or you have facial tattoos, or these things are going to work against you in the hiring process because marketing vice presidents, they want to be safe. They don't want the president of the company to say, who did you hire here? What guy? So I think that's a big part of it. The other part of it is you really have to learn how to be able to integrate a marketing message into a magic routine. And you have to get very comfortable with that. You have to learn the language and you have to learn kind of the science of it, because you can only, in the middle of a magic show, you can only talk about a company's features and benefits for so long before people will walk away. So this has to be, it's a dance that you have to kind of control between how much magic you can do and how much marketing you can do. So,
and what sort of, I know we talked about the goal is really attracting people to the booth, and whether it's selling the product or, getting them on an email list or something like that. Is that, when you are at a trade show, what do you have in mind? Are you I want to have the biggest group. I want to get the most emails on that list. I want to get the most people to buy the product. What's the metric aside from reactions that you're aiming for?
So the process is this, right? I attract a couple people to the booth, right? They don't come in a big group. Aren't suddenly 20 people standing in front of me. it starts by attracting 2 people. And maybe that's done with some giveaway I'm offering. Ooh, you picked the right card, you can win this $100 bill, right? And so that I'm suddenly engaged with them and I get the crowd to build. My goal is, yes, to have a big crowd, but also to be able to qualify those leads. Are these people interested in the exhibitor's product? So maybe during the show, I'm saying, show of hands if you have this kind of job, or show of hands if you are struggling. One of your pain points, and one of the reasons you're here at the trade show is because you're looking for a cybersecurity solution because you've recently been hacked. People raise their hands. Now the staff in the booth sees whose hand was raised, and they know who to talk to the moment my show is over.
Wow.
So the strategy is draw in a crowd, qualify the leads, finish up the show, give something out so they just don't leave. So they now have to take something. But in order for them to get the prize, the little prize giveaway, whether that's a 3-card Monty trick or a squeezy ball, whatever you're giving away at the booth, that's in exchange for letting me scan your badge. So you use the phrase, add them to an email list.
Whatever it is.
The process is that these things are all now built into phones, and everybody at the booth has a special app on their phone. They aim their phone at the person's badge who has a QR code on it, and boom, they've captured their information.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense.
And then they want to try to engage them in a further conversation and maybe demo.
And what sort of magic would one do at a trade show? Because it's sort of like somewhere between a close-up and a parlor environment. Because if you build a crowd enough, it's no longer close-up. You don't really want it to be one-on-one feeling things, but obviously it's not staged. So what kind of magic is fit for a trade show?
So tricks that work really well at trade shows are things that can be reset instantly. Because you finish a show and sometimes somebody will say, oh, I missed it. Would you do it again? And you got to be able to do it again, right?
Yeah.
So what really fits well that can be close up and parlor that resets instantly? Professor's Nightmare. Why is that? Why also is that really good? Because you have three props, short, medium, and long. And those are just ripe for product integration.
That's great. Yeah.
We work with small companies, medium-sized companies, and big companies. And that's just one example, right? Card tricks are great. Most people who are attending a trade show are problem solvers, right? Especially if they're in the world of information technology.
Yeah.
They're problem solvers. They enjoy that, Other tricks that really work well are anything with money, because money really attracts people to a booth. So any version of Hundy 500 or Extreme Burn is very effective. Even a bill count, even the 10, 11 count, that Red Cops popularized. Excellent. I do sponge balls. I do Eugene Berger's sponge ball routine. Extremely effective. I mean, a lot of magicians put it down, but the routine I have with it is extremely effective, draws a huge crowd, is memorable, mysterious, and surprising at the end. I also do a trick with a borrowed object, whether it's a borrowed bill or a watch or a ring. Very effective, because once you're holding their object, they can't leave, and their friends won't leave either. So you need to pick things that fit in your pocket, or at least can fit in a briefcase for easy. There's a lot of cup and ball magicians out there. They're also very good choice at trade shows.
Yep.
So those are the kinds of props, but most importantly, automatic reset, very important.
And I didn't ask this. How long on average is a trade show day?
On average, probably 7 hours, 8, but it can be 10,
Wow. So you could be performing 8 hours a day for 3 days in a row.
Right. And you are on your feet and you are only sitting down during lunch. So, when anybody wants to talk to me, I'm coaching several people on trade shows. They want to get into the market. So I'll do a series of Zoom calls with them and we'll talk about their show and everything. But the first thing I say to them is, Do you have the physicality to be able
get
to
ready to work, man.
stand on your feet all day long? And, a lot of people can't, their knees.
It's got the like good and bad news. Like the good news about it is that you will be a rock star at that magic. You will have jokes per second and you'll know exactly, like, nothing better than doing a trick 500 times in a day for 4 days in a row. That you just cannot beat that. The hard part is standing on your feet for 8 hours a day for 4 days.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to break in new material, trade shows are a lovely way to do it. You have 4 or 5 tricks that are solid and you're trying to break in this new thing. You can put it in kind of where you want, especially if you have a forgiving client. If it's not the first time you've worked for a client, I got a new trick I'm going to start doing. Oh, great. We can't wait.
Yeah.
By the end of the show, you've done it 40, 50 times and it's, you know it a lot better than you did the first time. Yeah. And, you will, I don't remember if it was Bud Dietrich or Mike Rogers, one of the early trade show magicians, that said, if you want to see a good close-up magician, find a trade show magician.
For sure.
So much experience.
For sure. It's like restaurant, but on steroids, because you're there for, 8 hours or something.
Right. You're there for longer. Absolutely. But that's why I think restaurant work is a great training ground for trade shows. It's different, and trade shows are harder. Because you have to remember the mindset of the person walking the trade show is, I am here, my company is paying for me, I'm supposed to be searching for new products and programs that will make my job easier and my colleagues' job easier or make my company more profitable. I'm not supposed to be having fun watching a magician. So the mind, most people, will walk by a trade show booth with a magician and not stop and say, well, I don't know what, some kind of weird demo going on there. I have a meeting I have to get to. I have a booth I have to see. There's a lot of rejection at trade shows and you can't take it personally.
Awesome. I feel like this is a real lesson behind the scenes in what it looks like to perform at trade shows. And nobody better to share that lesson with us than you. As we are nearing the last sort of portion of the podcast, there are some wrap-up questions that go with each episode. The first is about modern magic. What's one thing that you like about the world of modern magic, and what's one thing that you don't like about the world of modern magic right now?
What I like about the world of modern magic is that thanks to shows like AGT and Fool Us, magic is now an art form that the general public thinks is cool. In the 1980s, 70s and 80s and 90s, magic didn't come off that way. It was really hard to get people's attention if you went up to them in a restaurant and said you were a magician.
Yeah.
It was like, well, prove it. They weren't immediately excited. Now, if you go up to somebody, they've had that experience of watching a close-up magician on television, and they have seen superstars like Howie Mandel and all the judges go apeshit over a double lift, right? So the world now thinks of, they even know phrases like tableside magic, close-up magic, mentalism. The general public knows those phrases now, where 15 to 30 years ago, they didn't. So that is one thing that I really like about modern magic. And it has made being a magician not only easier, but more fun and more prestigious.
Yeah.
The thing I hate about magic and modern magic is the magic that we see on social media that is performed for social media and for the camera and only works at the one specific angle, and that that the magician videoed it 20 times until he made sure that the coin didn't flash when he did some kind of cool palm that, or got it to stick to the back of his hand using some kind of substance that really wouldn't work in everyday life. And that these routines are often sold as though it can be done in everyday life by an audience that surrounds you. You have to remember, I reviewed tricks for Genie magazine for 25 years.
Yeah.
And so I got to see this change of, magic products that were coming out originally in the 1990s versus the ones coming out, up until the pandemic when I ended my career as a reviewer.
And let me ask a follow-up question on that. How do you spot a good product? Because now that you've seen them all, how do you spot a good magic product that you're not falling for some, I don't want to say a scam, but something that you'll never use or do?
One of the ways is this part of that magician's repertoire? Have they been doing it for 5 to 10 years?
Yeah.
Lectures in the 1970s and 80s only contained magic that were in the repertoires of the lecturer.
Yeah.
Now, lecturers figure out a magic. I never use jokers in the deck. So every time I open a new deck, I pull out the jokers, and now I have 500 jokers sitting in a shoebox. I know I'm going to make a magic trick with jokers, and I'm going to sell them.
Right.
That's what happens now. And good, they're fit into an envelope. They're easy to carry. It's lightweight. Mailing costs will be low. I'll include a DVD or a download with it, and I have a product. But the trick, maybe it's good, maybe it's not. This is a big problem, but that's the way, I judge a magic trick, I want to see
if someone actually has been doing it.
Yeah. Is it part of their repertoire? Because it's not only can they do it, it's can they do it all night long?
Right.
Is it eatable? Is it easy to carry? Does it only take up one pocket? Or do you need 4 pockets to do this trick? These card tricks where you need 4 wallets in 4 different pockets to do the reveal, not so practical, are they?
Right. Yeah. Part of it will come down to practicality too,
Right. And so those are questions that I think the magic buyer needs to ask themselves.
And also for what they are buying it for. Like some people are buying magic that they can do on Instagram. Others are buying it that they can do at a restaurant gig, and others are buying. So, it doesn't scratch your itch of practicality.
Right. And that's fine, and if someone's trying to get, 200,000 followers on Instagram, and so they're doing magic for Instagram, that's fine. And it's, social media and Instagram are a new venue. They're a new performing venue to magic, and lots of people enjoy watching it. But we just have to be careful as magic buyers not to use Instagram or even a video of a magic trick that Penguin has produced or Vanishing Ink Magic has produced. We have to be very careful when we're watching a video to really think, is this practical for me and the people and the settings I perform in?
Love it. The next of the wrap-up questions has to do with what I call the endless chain. So in order to keep the podcast going on for eternity, each guest is asked to recommend another guest that would be a really good fit for this type of thing. There's 2 catches. Catch number 1, I cannot have had interviewed them already. And catch number 2 is you have to be able to put us in contact. Who would be a really good fit for this kind of conversation?
Well, I have 2 people that leap to mind, but I'm really partial about them both. One would be the host, the MC at the Chicago Magic Lounge, who you have met.
Of course, many times.
The incredible Jan Rose, who has one of the most interesting jobs in the magic community now. She has MC'd the Chicago Magic Lounge more than 600 or 700 times.
Wow.
Past few years, and has a really interesting take on what makes magic succeed, what type of magician and what type of act succeeds in a magic nightclub venue.
Wow.
So she could talk about that for a while.
That's great.
And then the other person is my daughter, Leah Orleans.
Yeah.
Who is putting together a radically new magic convention that'll be next March. called Mystify, which is a convention that is geared towards the community of people who really haven't felt comfortable at magic conventions, which have traditionally been events that are attended by 90% or more men. And she's putting together a magic convention that is going to, every lecturer, speaker, and performer will be a woman or someone from the trans community. So
Awesome.
it's going to be really interesting. And she has a lot to say about
two
sport.
phenomenal recommendations and keeping it in the family. So I love that. Last is where can people find you? Where can people find your stuff? Where can people stay up to date with the things that you're up to?
Well, I don't really market to the magic community. I don't have a lot of props that I'm really selling to the magic community. I kind of turned that all over to Vanishing Ink. But after the fire, I'm not sure how much they really have other than the downloads and the ebooks that I helped write.
Yep.
But people can go look there. I have an Instagram that people can look at and have fun with. It kind of shows where I'm and what I'm doing and my life on the road. And I do have if people are specifically interested in trade shows, they should join my trade show performers group on Facebook. We have about 1,500 members, and the people that are working trade shows post on there frequently where they're working, and they show pictures or video of them working. But I also put in tips, and I recently did the 13 steps to succeeding at trade shows, which is like the 13 steps of mentalism, what you need to do to get booked in those venues. That is really the hardest part. It's hard to put together a trade show act, but it's even harder to get booked.
For sure.
So I address that, and you can go, if you apply, make sure you answer the 3 questions, which are super easy. If you answer the 3 questions, most likely I'm going to admit you to the group, and you can easily read through the 13 steps. You can read through each one in about a minute or 2. And you really get a good sense that might be a good market for you.
And I'm going to see, I know I'm a part of it and there's really great value in there. I'm going to see if I can get the link to it in the description of this episode so that people can find it nice and easy.
Both trade show performers group.
Danny, I want to give you a huge thank you for doing this. This was awesome, ridiculously informative. And, like you said, it's such an amazing market, an important market, but underserved market. And these, trade show magicians are some of the secret pros of our industry because they work for only 30 companies. They do 50 hours a year for each company of magic. So they're some of the best, but it's the most underserved market. So a lot of magicians don't know a lot of trade show magicians who are crushing it and doing this kind of thing. So I appreciate you pulling back the curtain and letting us in on the trade show magic world and everything that we need to know in that world. I hope the people listening to this learned something and benefited from the lovely conversation with Danny. Thank you all so much for being here, and I will see you all next Thursday. Ciao, my friends. Well, there you have it. I hope you liked the episode, and I hope, of course, that you learned something. Danny is such a legend, and he shared so much with all of us, and I hope that you take this information and use it to book yourself more trade shows. If you want to book more company parties, like heading into October, November, December, want to do some corporate events, then I may be able to help. Send me a message with the word events, and I can chat with you and walk you through what I do and see if I can help. Other than that, please share this episode with the world. Tell somebody about this. Tell people that you learned about being a trade show magician and they can learn too. Because remember, this podcast is free. So I hope you liked it as much as I did, and I will see you next Thursday. Ciao.